Hey there, it's author and attorney Kelly O'Connell at Knockout Radio. Today's topic is COVID-positive illegals pouring across the border, which might reach 2.5 million people by year's end, and which could be 50,000 or more infected people coming across the border, and those could infect millions of Americans and cause tens of thousands of deaths. So, what can we do, if anything? Give me your suggestions on the page, and this essay will be posted on Canada Free Press tomorrow, and then I'm going to have a little bit of weird news for you afterwards. But in the general news, we've got some really hilarious stories from Hunter Biden, and apparently, unless it's a hoax, they found a new laptop in which he's talking to what appears to be, I think, a hooker, a Russian hooker. He's the one with the real Russian connections. And telling the hooker that he had lost another laptop, or it was stolen, whatever, that have government secrets on it. We've been having a lot of rain in the West, and it's just been flooding all over the place, so there's supposed to be a drought going on at the same time. We're sending apparently something like 3,000 troops back to Afghanistan. We suddenly pulled out, and the Taliban instantly took over. It's amazing. And they've got an incredible number of weapons, and we should have either taken those back with us or destroyed them. It's absurd to leave them behind. And there is a Haitian earthquake that 7.2 hit Haiti, 304 killed. There seems to be large earthquakes across the world now, and so I wonder if something's going on. But anyway, let's get into this article here. This year, here's the title, this year, 1.5 million COVID illegal cases might infect 2 million Americans. And here's the question of the day: do Democrats purposefully send hordes of untreated infected illegals across America for power? Now, that is a dicey question. Hopefully, Google doesn't go after me for simply asking the question, but they know, Biden knows that a lot of these people coming across the border they're ill. And one of the reasons they tend to have more sick people in their population of the illegals is because some of them are trying to get here just to get treated. They want to be hospitalized or whatever. But they don't have the medical system that we do down south, and they haven't approached the COVID the same way that we have. So a lot of people that are coming up from Central America and Mexico and across the world are COVID infected, and they say it's about 20%, although the sheriffs say that it's about 50% based on their observation, based on their interaction. But the main thing is, and the New York Times promoted this or reported it, that people, when they come to the border, are not given the COVID test. Now, you got to admit that's short-sighted when the test nowadays only takes about 10 minutes. And they could give all of these people coming across the border a shot if they wanted to, right? So why aren't they? That's the question. Why aren't they giving these people, if they're going to bring in what has been reported to be 1 million so far this year, and last month, believe it or not, it was 250,000 people that came in, and 18,000 of them were unaccompanied minors. If you know that a significant number of these people are COVID infected already, which could be 50,000 last month, why not give everybody a shot? So the Delta variant of COVID is a lot more virulent. It's a lot more infectious. So you're breaking these people, you're breaking the rules, you're bringing these people across the border. And what are they doing then? They're very quickly, you remember they didn't want them stacked up in these camps, in these facilities. They're taking them and busing them or flying them across the United States, knowing that they're COVID infected. So doesn't that mean that they're trying to infect people? They're not doing anything to check them. They're not doing anything to inoculate them. They're sending them across there, and they're not. Here's another telltale sign. They're not telling the cities or towns where they're shipping them that they've got illegals they're dropping off. They're not getting permission. That's why it's an illegal activity that they're doing. It's unconstitutional to create harm like that. The federal government to just kind of willy-nilly to commit avoidable harm. Now, here's one question. What's the cost of taking care of these people? And one figure was about $400. I think it was $396, or $72,000 a year. According to Axios, they found some agreements, some contracts that covered taking care of these people. Listen, folks, that's just for the place to stay. So let's just take this out a little bit. What would be the cost of 250,000 people coming in last month? 250,000 people. So it's an incredible number. In 2017, it was estimated the cost for an entire illegal population in America was $746 billion. Now, if it were amnesty, and that's what the Bidens want to do, they want to take 10 or 20 million illegals and give them instant citizenship, that would be a cost of $1.3 trillion in present value, or 6% of the GDP. And since 63% of non-citizen households collect government welfare, illegal immigration does cost taxpayers about $750 billion over their lifetime. So anyway, this is now, with the 250,000 people last month, is a 20-year high. It's the busiest we've been in 20 years at the border. So what did Biden do when he first got into office? He said our number one goal is COVID, and everybody supported that. And Biden used the vaccines that Trump and all the people that helped on this, all of the scientists, etc., worked to put together. But now we've got another surge. And my second question, which is tough too, is the surge caused by all of the illegal infected people being sent across America? Now you might say, well, that's unfair. You have no sympathy for these people. If they're sick, we need to take care of them. Well, why do we have to import sick people? You could at least test them at the border, and if they're sick, tell them to stay in Mexico till they're well. But kind of like this handover of Afghanistan, we handed Afghanistan back to the people, and now they're going in to kill, the Taliban are going in to kill all the people who are allies of the America, which is probably hundreds of thousands of people. And Biden claims to care about other people. That's why he wants to bring individuals across the border, and no matter who comes, he's going to bring them in. And did you know there's only a couple of crimes that'll block somebody from the border coming in? What are they? One's murder, and the other one is assault with a violent weapon. I think those are the two crimes. Every other criminal is allowed to come in here. How does that help America? So Biden didn't listen to his generals who said, let's do this more easily, let's be more careful, because there's a lot riding on it. There were, 20 years we've been in Afghanistan, and now we just flush it all down the border and abandon the people. And so what you've got going on now is the border czar, Mayorkas, they're trying to impeach him now because in private he admitted that the numbers are unsustainable, but he lies to the public, he lies to the Senate and the House. So in July 2021, ICE determined there were 212,672 illegals who entered America. Now, the Washington Post had already reported 1,000 undetected illegals cross each day, but it's probably more than that. But 212,000, 213,000 plus 30, another 30,000 is 242, 243. I mean, easy, we got up to 250,000 last month. So 250,000 immigrants entered in July, with 19 1,000 unaccompanied kids. Experts believe there's about 20% of them, or maybe up to 50%, who are COVID sick. New York Times says COVID on the border, migrants are being tested on their arrival to America. And so let's say conservatively, 50,000 infected aliens brought in, not tested, not treated, immediately sent across the country to Des Moines, to Bakersfield, to Orlando, to Poughkeepsie, to New Orleans, wherever it is that there's room for people, which I guess is the entire country, they're going to ship them there. They don't call ahead, they don't get permission, so these people show up in cities where the homeless crisis is already raging, and where the facilities are already full, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of sick people wandering around. So if 2.5 million illegals come in here by the year's end, I'm guessing that the transmission rate, which is about 3.5, that's the high end, 3.5%. But that was the old COVID. The new COVID, Delta, is much more, it's 3 times more virulent. So 3 times 1, so it's 1 to 3.5, or like say 1.5 to 3.5, is typically how many people are infected by a sick person with COVID. So if it's 3.5, what's 3.5 times 1.5? And that's, what is it, like 5? And then up to 10. So between 5 and 10 people are going to be infected by each one of these 50,000. That's an incredible number of people. So it's just depressing to think about. Now, while a lot of the illegals are coming for medical treatment, another 30% in the future will refuse to get the shot. So Delta is much more infectious, and one study of the old COVID said that one victim could, in theory, infect 60,000. Now, kind of hard to believe, but in the meantime, I tried to track all this information down for you if you can keep it in your brain. The CDC says Hispanic ratio for COVID is 1.7 times whites. So almost twice as many Hispanics will get COVID than whites. Kind of factor that in there. And so if 1% of Americans died by being infected by a sick COVID illegal, that's 10,000 deaths on 1 million. But what if it's 2 or 3 million? Now, what's the cost to treat them? Between $35,000 and $45,000, depending on the age of the victim. So if it was just 1 million, it would be $40 billion to treat. But if it was 3 million people who were infected, it ended up being $120 billion. So, and maybe it'll only be $2 billion. But you know that, or pardon me, 2 million that get it. But you do understand that people are going to get sick and die from these individuals that the Biden administration is choosing to let across the border. Now, what was it like under the last administration? Well, we're informed that in April 2020, there was 16,182 illegals apprehended. 1/13th less than what's there now, and it's actually less people than the number of underage who've come across minors. There were less people who came across than minors that came across by several thousand. So I've just been talking to a friend of mine, Matt. If you're listening to this, it's great to talk to you about it, and I'm glad to have another friend to be able to put heads together on this. What can we do about it? Well, if Delta is 3 times as infectious as the original strain, and 83% of new cases are Delta, then it's just putting an enormous strain on America. In the meantime, we are being lectured that we're going to have to use masks if we care. You know, Biden's getting up and giving these emotional speeches, and he can barely read the cards that are put in front of him. So we're getting lectured on the vaccine and on masks. In the meantime, they're moving 50,000 or more, maybe it's 100,000 people a month in that have the disease. How can this not blow up in their face? Why do they say that they care? And you might say, well, it's not as bad as you say, O'Connell. Well, I got a Scientific American article that was titled "America's Immigration System is a COVID Super Spreader. ICE detention centers have some of the worst outbreaks in the country, endangering immigrant staff and local communities." And this last month, 7,000 illegals passed through McAllen, Texas, who tested positive for COVID. I guess there was some people there that they tested. And in the meantime, a new variant has shown up in Dallas called Lambda, and we don't even know about that, but they're saying that Delta variant could be more dangerous than the old COVID. So, are bad policies, is Biden seeking to put into practice bad policy? Because aren't they fool's gold for leftists? Don't they think that they're going to hit the lotto? They're going to hit a grand slam, a Ray Charles grand slam. They're going to go up and close their eyes and swing the bat and hit a grand slam. So like many Biden policies, whatever their supposed motivation is, and I have a friend who's a pastor who told me that the people crossing the border are Christians and that they are here. You made it sound like they're here to do the Lord's work, and I said, if they're Christians, they're evangelicals, why are they breaking the law to get here? And he said, because the law is wrong. All right. So he told me if I didn't want illegals to come in, that I was a racist. So I haven't talked to him much since then. But anyway, now, bad policies, fool's gold for leftists. How about this one? Biden is today begging OPEC countries, Middle East countries, to pump more oil because petroleum is going through the roof here. It is up about 50% since the last administration. Now, don't forget, in his first day in office, Biden canceled the massive United States Canadian Keystone Pipeline, which represented 1 million barrels a day of potential oil because of global warming. Then, in between, he okayed a Russian pipeline that goes into Germany that the entire continent of Europe was opposed to, and we had blocked it, and then Biden decided one day he was going to okay it for some reason, didn't even really explain why. So, does that make sense? We're begging for oil when we've got a pipeline, a giant pipeline in our country that we've shut down that would hold 1 million barrels of gas a day, of petroleum a day, pardon me. So instead of opening that pipeline, he begs the Middle East. So you know, when we lost Afghanistan, he started begging the Taliban not to destroy our embassy over there. Why not just leave 5,000 or 10,000 troops around the embassy? Why does it have to always be this craziness going on over there? So, but he's also, you know, Biden in his demented craziness seems to suggest or implies that global warming can only happen in the United States, not in Russia, in Germany, or Saudi Arabia. So, we're living at a time, my dear friends, when everything is only politics, and that is the hallmark, that is the absolute best description that you could ever give to Marxism. Because in Marxism there is only politics, and leftism, socialism, communism, liberalism, leftism, progressivism. It's only politics. And there's a stipulated lack of religion that means everything is viewed through the prism of power, not ethics or morality. Therefore, we must use politics and any other sane means to derail the most Marxist administration in the United States history. And my buddy Matt said, Kelly, I think it's over. It's too late. Now, I refuse to say that, but I kind of wonder sometimes, you've got so many politically minded people in office who think the only thing that matters is politics, and politics is power. Weren't we built on the idea of city on a hill that would be a light for the world, and the city on the hill has been devalued. It's been dragged down to the gutter. It's now a ghetto. The city in the ghetto, in which the only thing that matters is how much strength, how ballsy you are, how crafty or angry or evil you are to go and grab power and then use it to oppress others. Now, do you doubt Biden's team would infect millions more Americans with COVID to increase democratic power by diminishing liberty and putting a chokehold on small businesses and controlling the economy with mask mandates and vaccine passports? I believe it. I mean, didn't Cuomo kill 20,000 people because he didn't want them to go onto a ship that Trump had shown? And then Whitmer in Michigan did the same thing, the same crazy decision. I mean, that's a fact, right? So, if you don't think the government would send COVID-infected people throughout America without tests and vaccines, knowing that Americans would get infected and sickened and die, you're not listening to the facts. That's already happened. Now, why is it happening? The left will tell you it's because they love people and want to get as many people out of bondage in Central America or Mexico, right? Doesn't matter how many people die in the meantime, I guess. But why wouldn't it be true of Cuba? Cuba is more oppressed, more impoverished, more enslaved than any of these other countries, and yet if a person from Cuba shows up, they are sent back to Cuba where they could be imprisoned or killed. And they say there are something like 5,000 people that are now missing after these protests. So if you don't think the government would do that, you're living in a fool's paradise, and your days of prosperity, freedom, and happiness are almost at an end, and dare I say, deservedly so. Folks, let's come together and let's fight this before it is really too late. All right. Now that I got that out of the way, weird news. A bank teller got a note from a guy in Britain, a guy by the name of Alan Slattery, who had been on a rampage of robberies, and he handed him the note, and the teller couldn't read the note, and so it was foiled. And so he comes in and gives the note. The teller looks at this and tries to read it, and he can't read it. And so the bank robber shrugs and leaves. That's what I guess he should have been. His handwriting was bad. I guess he should have been a doctor. Here's what, if you translated it, here's what it would have said. Your screen won't stop what I've got. Just hand over the 10s and 20s. Think about the customers. But it was unintelligible. So, kind of reminiscent of the movie Take the Money and Run, Woody Allen movie, in which a goofy bank robber goes in and tries to rob the bank, and he gets in an argument with the teller. He gives him a note, and it talks about a gub. Instead of a gun, it says gub, and so there's an argument whether the word is gub or gun, so he's foiled. So anyway, this guy is 67, and I think he'll be spending some time cooling his heels in the national prison system there. Okay, so here's another one. I'm trying to do more than one weird news a day or per podcast because I've got so many great ones. Dutch tourist dies after swallowing car keys in Spain. A guy, and they don't know, because the guy's dead, they don't know why he had his car keys in his mouth, but he had them, he was choking on them, and he went and tried to, and this is in the Sarriá district of Catalonia, the capital, and he was very excited and causing an altercation, and so they restrained him and then tried to resuscitate him after the arrival of medical personnel, but they died. And when they looked in his mouth, he had keys stuck in his throat, but he couldn't tell anybody. So I guess you should practice your pantomime skills, because it seems like I would, wouldn't you ask for a piece of paper and say, write it down? But I mean, on the other hand, if he's from Britain, I think if you don't speak Spanish, you're in a world of hurt. All right. Pennsylvania man leads cops to father's head on a dinner plate. And they don't say what the disagreement was, but Donald Lawrence Meshi Jr., 32, killed Donald Meshi Sr., 67, dismembered him. This is a very strange crime. A relative of the family hadn't seen the dad in a while, and so they called the police. They showed up and asked the son, and he said, well, he had a cadaver in one of the beds. And so he had sawed his head off. He died by stabbing wounds. Then he sawed his head off and put it on a white plate and stuck it in the freezer. And being questioned, he said that he had stabbed his father 2 to 3 minutes with a knife before dismembering his body, which he called a cadaver doll. During the interview, Meshi said he found what he described a cadaver doll in his father's bedroom, which looked and sounded like his father. So this guy's obviously schizophrenic or something like that. So, and then he had removed parts of the body, and so anyway, very odd. And all right, so 3 is probably good enough. Anyway, thanks for listening. And listen, we've got an opportunity to do something about this. I have a good friend who's a Christian, and we got into an argument last night. And he said the purpose of being a Christian is to persuade people about the coming of the kingdom and Jesus is God and all this stuff. And I said, you know what? My friend's name is Wayne. I said, you know what, Wayne? That's maybe true, but the history of the West is the history of the application of the doctrines from the Bible into society. And he disagreed with me, or he didn't know, it didn't matter. And so I tried to tell him all these doctrines that are coming in history out of the Bible. And I'll just give you the one example. The people who came across on the Mayflower were from what church? They were from the Congregationalist Church. The Congregationalists were the first offshoot of the Anglicans, and they believed in a system of the Presbyterian. They're not Presbyterian Church, but they believed in the Presbyteros model, or presbyter model, and a presbyter is just an elder. So they believed in leadership of elders, not a central church in some part of the country or in another country like the Catholic Church. They believed in local leadership. And that one thing got them kicked out of the Anglican Church, because the Anglican Church was at one point part of the Catholic Church, and so there was national leadership in the Anglican Church. So these people were harassed, they were tortured, they were locked up, and so many of them came over on the Mayflower. All right, they got here and they established a city, Plymouth, a town. Funny enough, one of the people in the group was a black man. They called him a blackamoor, and it does not appear he was owned by anybody. He just was part of the crew, or part of the group that came over. And so these people put their churches together, and they say, if you recall, the only thing that we're looking for in this new place is religious freedom. That's all they wanted. And so running their churches, they found I believe it was after about 100 years, that the model of running a church based on elders, as opposed to a national or international headquarters, it was so efficient, it was so good that they wanted to bring it into the voting system. So they brought it in to the voting system, and that's where our version of democracy came from. It did not come from ancient Rome. It did not come from ancient Greece, believe it or not. And I've got a great book on this, which I'm looking for. I'll tell you about it next time. I've got 2 copies of it, though. So anyway, let's stick together. Let's fight. A lot of this stuff is just crazy on the surface, let's speak to the paper. Let's speak to our friends and neighbors. Let's send letters and telegrams to, do they still send telegrams, by the way? Let's send phone calls and texts and emails and letters to our representatives saying, if you don't fight against this, I'm voting for somebody else. So anyway, be prepared for a lot more COVID, but let's fight and let's overturn all this garbage. Kelly O'Connell, and it is podcast called the Knockout Podcast Radio. And give me a thumbs up and join my channel. Hope you have a great day and stay dry from all these storms. Kelly O'Connell. Ciao.